Guys, I had no idea that what we now call the Middle East was actually North Africa. I didn't know that. I found that out recently that, first of all, they created the Suez Canal to break off Africa and that what we call the Middle East from Africa. But also the name the Middle East was created by the British during colonialism, and it was just designed to create a separation between that hemisphere and Africa, the continent itself. It's absolutely fascinating.
I need all your listeners to listen to what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
The land of Israel is Northeast Africa. I'm going to say it again. The land of Israel is Northeast Africa. Remember, we walked from Egypt to the land of Canaan. We walked.
Yeah. That's why Christ came to hide in Egypt, right?
And he walked. They walked. His family walked.
They didn't sail?
Huh? No, they didn't sail. Today you have to sail. Why do you have to sail today? What did America do with Egypt and Britain? What did they do back in 1859?
What did America do with?
Yes. What did they do in Egypt?
I don't know.
They built the Suez Canal.
Okay.
And they divided Egypt from Israel. A huge ravine and connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. So now you can no longer walk. So now it made it easier to say, oh, well, on the other side of that water is the Middle East. So now when you think of Christ or the Jews, you think either white people or Arabs. You don't think black people. If it was connected, you would always say they're black. But now they disconnected it. You got to see the witchcraft of this man.
Bishop, wait.
The Suez Canal, which was built 90 years earlier, was built with Egyptian labor. Tens of thousands of Egyptians died building the Suez Canal. But it was funded by French banks and English banks that Egypt was forced to take a loan for. So who was going to benefit from the Suez Canal? France and Great Britain, because they could send their goods through the Suez Canal from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. Who paid for it? Egypt had to pay for it, using Egyptian labor. Egypt gets totally hosed in the process. Tens of thousands of dead Egyptians and massive debt. And the British used that debt in 1882 to unilaterally invade and conquer Egypt. One of the things the British do is they declare that the Suez Canal zone is actually an international zone. So Naser decides he'll nationalize the Suez Canal, and then every time a ship goes through, he's going to charge money for the ship. Almost instantaneously, the Israelis attack, the French and the British attack. Their goal was to trap the Egyptian army in the Sinai, destroy it, and then force Egypt to hand the Suez Canal back to the Brits. This should have been European/Israeli military victory in Egypt. It doesn't end up being that way. France and Great Britain are put in their place by the United States and then insist that Egypt get the Suez Canal, which Egypt does get. But the US fails to capitalize on this totally. And instead of Egypt falling into the United States camp, it falls into the Soviet Union camp.
Britain and France secretly plotted to take over global trade. But Egypt outplayed them all. It's 1956. One narrow strip of water holds the key to global power, the Suez Canal. It's in Egypt, and it used to be under British control, but not anymore. Egypt's bold new president just nationalized it. Overnight, the most powerful trade route on Earth was now in Egyptian hands. So two countries meet in secret to take it back, Britain and France. They make a plan. They will imitate a fake invasion. Then Britain and France will step in, pretending to be peacekeepers. But this was never about peace. It was about power. But the moment the invasion begins, the unthinkable happens. The United States and the Soviet Union both side with Egypt. Even the United Nations condemns the plan. Egypt refuses to back down. Instead, they order every ship in the canal destroyed, blocking the trade route entirely. Britain and France don't regain control. They lose what's left of their global influence. And Naser? He doesn't just survive. He becomes a symbol of resistance.
Israel was adjacent to Africa. It was the land of Ham, or the land of Ham. It was one land.
Yes.
What the Europeans did, they created that artificial canal and separated
To
Israel.
separate
Yes.
Africa from Israel.
Right. So now most people think, and they created a term called the Middle East. The term Middle East was created by another white man called Alfred Mahan Thayer.
Yes.
So now when you think Israel, people go Middle East, white people, or Arabs. They don't think of people like you or I.
I'm Captain Alfred Thayer Mahan, a devoted scholar of naval strategy and history. During my studies, I designated the area between Arabia and India as the Middle East, a term that has since grown in acceptance and use. Why the Middle East, you ask? Well, let me tell you, it's not just a question of geography. It's a matter of strategic importance. Look here, at this crossroad of continents, where three parts of the world intersect. East meets west, north meets south. The Mediterranean, the Arabian Peninsula, the Persian Gulf, all merging with the Indian Ocean. An epicenter of cultural exchange, yes, but more critically, a focal point of global maritime routes. You see, when I served as the president of the Naval War College in the 1880s, our world was changing rapidly. Steam-powered ships were replacing sail, and coaling stations, like those found in this Middle East, were vital for the endurance and reach of our fleets. Maritime supremacy was not just about numbers, but about control over these choke points of global commerce and communication. I designated this region as the Middle East because I knew, as any sailor does, that whoever controls these seas, controls the world. I'm Alfred Thayer Mahan, reminding you that the power of a nation is more than its armies, it's its navy, and the seas they navigate. So, the next time you hear the term Middle East, remember that it was I, Alfred Thayer Mahan, who contributed to its designation.
Ever wondered why navies are crucial in global power dynamics? Let's dive into the mind of Alfred Thayer Mahan. Mahan, a 19th century naval officer and historian, revolutionized how we think about naval warfare. In his landmark book, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, Mahan argued that national greatness was tied to maritime dominance. He believed that control of the seas meant control of global trade and military power. Historically, great empires like Britain proved this by ruling the waves, shaping the world's destiny. Even today, Mahan's theories influence naval strategies. Powerful navies project power, protect trade routes, and ensure national security. Mahan identified 6 conditions for sea power: advantageous geography, good coastlines, ample resources, large territory, seafaring society, and a sea-focused government. He emphasized that control of strategic choke points means control of global trade. So, next time you see a naval ship, remember Mahan's lesson: sea power shapes the world.
Did you know that Israel attacked Egypt in October 1956 and seized control of the Suez Canal? Before 1956, the Suez Canal was ruled by Britain and France, and the toll tax of every ship enriched their empires. This man-made wonder is important because before it, ships had to circle the whole of Africa to reach Europe. But in 1956, Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain and France erupted in anger. Their factories depended on Middle Eastern oil, their empires thrived on toll taxes, and they were determined not to surrender the world's most vital waterway to Egypt. Then Britain, France, and Israel hatched a secret plan. Israel would strike first as the frontline attacker, followed by large-scale air operations from Britain and France, and their plan initially succeeded to control the Suez Canal. The role of the UN and the superpowers was remarkable. The Soviets openly backed Egypt with nuclear threats, while the USA, unwilling to risk its position in the Middle East, warned Britain and France with strict sanctions. Under this combined pressure, the invasion collapsed within weeks, and Egypt regained the canal.
They nationalized the Suez Canal. The next thing you know, the British and the French are invading, and the Israelis are invading. And their whole goal is to destabilize Naser, to humiliate him so badly that he can't do anything. You go, okay, so did they succeed? And here's the answer: no, because the United States turns on Great Britain and France. And then Eisenhower goes to the UN Security Council and goes, I want UN troops in the Sinai now. French and the British have to get out right now. And at that point, 1956, nobody said no to the United States. Right? We were the crazies who dropped a nuclear bomb twice. Like the whole world is like, yeah, whatever, here. And so there are actually UN troops going into Egypt with orders to shoot the French and the British if they're still there.
The Palestinians say that they will not accept the state of Israel.
Yeah, you know, they said that they will not accept state based on Judaism, on racial discrimination. And that's why they say that they want a democratic country for all religion.
But the Israelis won't give up their state based on Judaism. So the Palestinians will have to continue the fight for.
Yes, but the Palestinians, according to the United Nations Security Council resolutions, they have the right to return back to their homes and their country.
But doesn't this anyway mean if Israel won't accept that the Palestinians will have to continue the fighting?
What will be the other alternative for the Palestinians?
No, I understand this, but then there won't be peace, even if Jordan and Egypt accept it.
Yes, but when we speak about peace, we must know the real interpretation of peace. Why this problem continued on for 22 years? On 48, the Israelis occupied parts of the Arab part of Palestine and refused, after the armistice, to take back the refugees. That's why the problem continued. If there is a solution about the Palestinian rights, if there is a resolution about the refugee problem, there will be no problem after that, and by that there will be peace.
Have you ever wondered why Israel attacks Gaza again and again? Why not the West Bank? Why Gaza only? To understand, we go back to 1956. That year, Egypt's president nationalized the Suez Canal. This canal is a lifeline for world trade. It connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. Without it, ships must circle Africa. More time, more cost, less trade. 12% of global trade still passes through Suez, and Egypt earns billions from it. But back then, Egypt blocked Israel's ships. For 8 years, Israel's trade was strangled, so Israel dreamed of its own canal, the Ben Gurion Canal, a rival to the Suez, 300 kilometers long, billions in cost. But here's the twist. The straightest and cheapest route runs through Gaza. That means displacement. That means bombings. That means blood. For Israel, Gaza isn't just territory. It's a barrier standing in the way of a canal that could change global trade. Remember, the Panama Canal controls 5% of trade. Suez controls 12%. Together, that's 17% of the world's economy. And imagine if Israel had that kind of power. So next time you hear about bombings in Gaza, ask yourself, is this really about security, or is it about trade, canals, and control of the world's lifelines?
It is the best $3 billion investment we make. If we look at the Middle East, I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
Not Middle East,
but
please.
You did not
No,
mention,
not Middle East.
Yeah.
Just a second.
Let me finish and
No.
then
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The minute I hear Middle East, I become upset. Because this is a colonial language. It's like third word, like post-colonial. Middle East. Middle, what? Middle to who? You have to ask yourself. When we
So
learn...
what is the term to
I'll
be
tell
used?
you. Just
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
Patience. Knowledge comes from you ask yourself why. Who called us? Why we are called Middle East? We were named, and we have to study history. We were named Middle East because we were a British colony. So Egypt was Middle East relative to London. And India was called Far East relative to London because India was also a colony. So now, when I go to London, I say I go to the Middle West. And people laugh. When I go to the United States, I say I'm going to the Far West. And people even laugh. But when she say Middle East, nobody laugh. You see? That's colonialism. That's colonial language that we need to decolonize the language. Go on. So you go on now.
Now, we're going to go over here, and I'm going to show you where Israel sits on the African tectonic plate, which means that Israel is northeast Africa. Now, when we look at this map, this is the Sinai. Okay? This is the Red Sea. This is Egypt. This is the Sinai. This is Israel. All right? This is Saudi Arabia over here. Now, if you see this in Hebrew, it says Haluach Afrikani, the African plate. Here it is right here. Israel is sitting right here. Israel is sitting on the Haluach Afrikani, which means that Israel is northeast Africa.
And how important one little strip of water can be, both for the economy, but also for countries who want power. Let's get back to the Suez Canal. Take a look at this canal for like 5 seconds and you realize that it's not natural. Way too straight of lines. But back before it was built, if you wanted to get from Europe to Asia, you had to sort of do this. Back then, the British controlled this little port in South Africa, which gave them a very nice strategic advantage because everyone who was doing world trade or domination had to pass through them. The British were loving this monopoly over the trade route until like the mid-1800s, when the French went to the Egyptians and they said, hey, is there any way we could like dig out a canal right here on this land bridge that connects Africa with Asia? It's almost 200 kilometers long, but if we could just dig out a canal here, we would save thousands of kilometers on each trip to Asia. Reminder, this is like the 1860s and like they don't have loads of fancy equipment to do this, but they try it anyway. With over 100,000 people, many of them forced laborers, working on this canal for over 10 years, they were able to dig this big canal that connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. The British were down here still like, wait, why is no one coming through our Cape anymore? And the French were up here just laughing, feeling so good about their new canal. So over the years, quickly this becomes the epicenter of water control and balance of power. Control over the canal is mainly French and Egyptian for most of its time, but eventually the British just like couldn't help themselves. They needed in on this waterway. Fast forward a few years and all of the big powers get together and say like, whoa, 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 we built this canal with a spirit of cooperation and neutrality. All countries should be able to use this canal even in times of war. Everything will be peaceful and wonderful, and this will be one. No. They signed this treaty about like neutrality and everyone can use it, but let's just say it right now, that's not the way the world works. Soon the globe descended into World War, and it became clear that this canal would not be neutral anytime soon. Hitler wanted it, so him and his Italian allies went down to try to take it over. British fought back and they were able to keep it, and there were British troops there, so the canal remained in British control until like the 1950s, when finally Egypt was like, okay, listen, France, Britain, this has been fun, this whole pretend that this is neutral, but it's not actually neutral and you're actually just using it for whatever you want thing. You're done. It is our canal. Get out of here. And he's like, oh, and Israel, you can't come here and use our waterway either. That's part of this. So France and Britain aren't feeling super great. They just got kicked out of like their key strategic waterway. They decide to say no, and they send in a bunch of paratroopers to the Suez Canal along with Israel's fighters to recapture the canal from Egypt and to overthrow the government that just kicked them out. And the US is seeing all of this, and they're like, guys, it's not 1850 anymore, okay? Times have changed. You can't just show up wherever you want and just take it over militarily. We don't do that anymore. That's so like old school empire. But the US says you can still be an empire in these times. You just have to be a little smoother about it. Good, baby, good. So the US sends in this Canadian guy to settle the conflict over the canal, and everyone's sort of like, okay, fine. And the canal goes back to peace with like some UN peacekeepers to keep it at peace. Kind of. Well, no, this isn't gonna last. So this is where the US gets it creative and is like, ooh, what can we do to not have to like fight over the canal, but like do our own thing? And that's when the nuclear bombs come up, where they're like, if we just plant 520 nuclear bombs here in the Israeli desert, we could just have our own canal and then we don't have to fight over this one. So it's 1967 and Israel's like, I'm not super into the idea of you like nuking our desert, but we like nuclear weapons, and we'll totally get on board with that. In the meantime, can we go in and attack Egypt ourselves and get the canal, and you can just sort of back us from the sidelines? And the US is like, okay, fine.
Whether or not in Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region.
So Israel goes in and takes over all of this land, all the way up to the Suez Canal. So it's Egypt on one side, Israel on the other. And for the next few years, this becomes a literal battleground for multiple wars. Like they were building bridges across the canal to like bring in tanks and fight. Oh, and of course, during these years of fighting from like the late 60s to the mid 70s, the canal was closed for obvious reasons. The problem is when they closed it, there were 15 ships that were like in process of moving through, and those ships just got stuck there for literally 8 years. So yeah, Ever Given, we know that it was a hard few days. The world was super worried about you, $400 million a day. Imagine being one of these guys. 8 years. At least they had fun during their time, I guess. Okay, do you see where I'm going with this? What I'm trying to do here is not give you a history lesson of the Suez Canal. I'm trying to explain that this stretch of water has always been a magnet for international conflict. Ever since its very, very conception. After that last war, the US is like, okay, broker a peace, they broker a peace, and then they bring in these helicopters to the Suez Canal with like a water sled behind them, and they drag them along the water because there was a bunch of like live explosives from the wars, and they were trying to like rid them all so that they could resume, you know, like normal shipping lanes. They eventually did that, they got rid of all the explosives and reopened the canal in 1975, and the canal remained peaceful and under the control of its rightful owner, the Egyptians, forevermore, and there was no more conflict or geopolitical scheming ever again. No, that isn't the way the world works. Yes, things have changed in the way that we do it. But the fact is, when you have a system like this, and a large portion of that system, which is money and control and economics and energy, runs through a choke point in that system, there will always be geostrategic value that is put on that system, not just for economics, but for power. So do you think that the United States, who's sort of the big boy world policeman right now, would sit here and let Egypt control the chokehold where 12% of the world economy passes through, including loads of oil? No, that's not how it works. Despite the fact that Egypt is a non-democratic regime that is pretty terrible on all fronts, including human rights, the US still provides $1.4 billion of military aid to Egypt every year. They are always considered a key ally in the Middle East. I mean, the Clinton administration made it very clear that the reason we support Egypt is because they have the Suez Canal and we need them to owe us favors. That continues today. Whenever a US military vessel shows up to the Suez Canal, they get to cut in line and go through quicker than everybody else. So yeah, Egypt owns the canal, but really it's the US behind the scenes that is keeping everything in order. The canal is not neutral, it will never be neutral. There will always be geopolitical importance placed on it. And as long as there's a superpower, that superpower will control the canal. The last thing I'll say here is that we live in a world that is very strange for how peaceful it is. We've had an enduring peace for many, many decades. That peace allows us to have a system like this. And that peace exists partly because we are so entangled with one another economically that it doesn't make sense to go to war. But we have to remember that that peace also exists because all the big powers have really big weapons that are always pointed at each other. If something slips or escalates a little too far, just remember that the Suez Canal isn't the only choke point on Earth where all of this system flows through. And that while we take peace for granted now, it would be naive not to wonder what happens if that were to go away, and we were faced with not just one ship being stuck for a few days, but an entire region militarized and unavailable for this type of shipping flow that we're so used to.
The Ben Gurion Canal project, alternatively known as the Israeli Canal or Palestinian Canal, is an ambitious proposal to construct a waterway through Israel. The canal would connect the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, serving as a competitor to Egypt's Suez Canal, which currently sees the passage of 12% of the world's trade and 10% of global oil distribution. The project is estimated to cost between $16 billion to $55 billion and would span approximately 182 miles or 293 kilometers, making it nearly one-third longer than the existing Suez Canal. The idea of constructing an alternative to the Suez Canal has been discussed for decades. Named after Israel's founding father and first Prime Minister, Ben Gurion, the canal aims to address the various disruptions that have plagued the Suez Canal, including blockages and prolonged closures. The proposed route for the Ben Gurion Canal would start at the Gulf of Aqaba near the port city of Eilat on the Israeli-Jordanian border. It would then traverse the Arabah Valley for about 100 kilometers between the Negev Mountains and the Jordanian highlands. The canal would turn westward before reaching the Dead Sea Basin and continue through a valley in the Negev mountain range. Finally, it would curve northward the Gaza Strip and link up with the Mediterranean Sea. Clearly, the canal would offer similar advantages to the Suez Canal. Proposal has generated significant
significant interest and debate given its potential impact on global trade and geopolitical dynamics. This is particularly noteworthy when considering the economic stakes involved. For context, the Suez Canal reported a record annual revenue of $9.4 billion for the fiscal year ending on June 30th.
The United States destroyed Syria and the Middle East. There's no doubt about that. I have vague evidence, not strong but vague evidence, that the CIA was behind the Arab Spring. If you look at these leaders like Assad, Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, they are strong men. You might not agree with that with Western standards, but that's usually good in those sort of developing middle-income countries. What the deep state shaitan does, they go to that 1% in those countries that are dissatisfied, finance them, sometimes give them weapons, and then promote the opposition on CNN and BBC. That sparks protests and dissatisfaction with the leader. That's how they knocked out Gaddafi. In Iraq, they just went and bombed the country. They tried to do it against Assad, but Russia supported Assad. And in Iran, they tried the same thing. Arabs are not descendants of pharaohs. No, they are not. What you call Arabs today, the white Arabs, they are descendants of Byzantine Greek, Persian, and Turkic invaders. And if you look at Greek, Persian, and Turkic people, they just look like white Arabs. The pharaonic people or the Kemite are black African people with a black African culture resembling around Ma'at. There are many tribes who are descended from the ancient Egyptians today, such as Ethiopians, Eritreans, Somalians, Sudanese, Fulani, Berber, Tuareg, etc. Black Arabs also, but that's a separate story. Racism in the Arab world, let's talk about it. This is Mariam Hussein from Morocco, 2020, doing blackface on TV. Here is Tanya Saleh from Lebanon, doing blackface in Lebanese TV. Here is an Egyptian show doing a blackface in 2018 in mockery to African people. Here are some of the victims of blackface, like the Sudanese are commonly mocked in Arabic media. Melanated Egyptian Nubian, which is a minority in southern Egypt today. Also the Yemeni black Arabs or melanated Arabs and minority. And the funny thing is that these melanated Sudanese, Egyptians, Yemenis are some of the original people, but they are usually in a lower caste in society and heavily oppressed by racism.
Most white people in America and Europe believe about their history is not history at all. It's mythology designed to produce a specific kind of person. A person who does not feel guilty. A person who does not feel accountable. A person who does not feel responsible for ever changing anything because they don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're taught that their ancestors were pioneers, their ancestors were explorers and builders of civilization, that they've brought progress and democracy and enlightenment to the world. They hear about the Renaissance, they hear about the Industrial Revolution, they hear about the Age of Discovery, and so forth and so on. And not about enslavement, not about genocide, not about the theft, not about the destruction that their people are responsible for. They're not taught that their prosperity was built on unimaginable suffering. They're not taught that their systems of government, their financial empires, their very sense of national identity are all rooted in exploitation. They don't know about the crimes. They don't know the real legacy of their people. And so they don't change. They don't have to change because they don't even realize what they need to correct. You know, when we look at colonialism, for example, the history that's taught in Western schools is usually an abstraction. Colonization is framed as something that it just sort of happened a long time ago, you know, something that was maybe unfortunate, but it was inevitable, and ultimately it represented progress, and there were many beneficial things to come from it. Never mind the millions of Africans who died in the Congo Free State under King Leopold. Most white Americans have never heard of them. Never mind the Bengal famine of 1943 when millions of Indians starved to death due to British policies. They don't even know about it. The fact that the American police forces evolved from slave patrols, they don't know about that either. And they're not any more informed about the ongoing crimes, like the pillage of African resources today, the economic neo-colonialism that keeps entire regions of the world impoverished, the exploitation of labor in the global south. These aren't relics of history. That's the present day reality of what your people are doing. But the story that that white people are told does not include those realities, or else it packages those realities deceitfully and dishonestly. They packaged them dishonestly and deceitfully in the past, just like they do now. The irony is that when they're confronted with the truth, many of these people will react defensively. You know, I didn't do that. That was in the past. Why should I feel guilty? But this reaction, in and of itself, reveals how little they're really understanding. It's not about guilt. It's about responsibility. You know, if a person inherits a stolen house, they may not have stolen it themselves, but they still live in it. And if they refuse to acknowledge where that house came from or how it came into their possession, if they insist that that house is rightfully theirs because the crime happened a long time ago, well, then they're complicit because the theft is ongoing. The crime never really stopped. So when people don't know their history, they cannot recognize when history is repeating itself and when history is actually just a continuum into the present.